Boom, Watch Fam!
What is up, Watch Fam, and welcome to episode 124 of Ask TNH. I am Christian from Theo and Harris, and before we jump into today's episode, we'll do a quick wristwatch check. I am wearing a vintage Tudor, an Oyster London model, 34 millimeters, but an unpolished, super sharp gold capped case. This watch has an eggshell white dial and some radium burn, and the patina is absolutely original, but beautiful as well. So I'm wearing this watch and enjoying the hell out of it until it sells. If you haven't checked out the latest releases that came out on Tuesday, go do so now. Let's get into the episode. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about a new release from one of my favorite companies that I don't even talk about very often, but Ressence. Ressence just released a Type 1 squared, and this episode is going to kind of talk about the watch, of course, and what it is and what it looks like and the dimensions and my thoughts, but more so how I think that Ressence is doing so well managing their future production line by paying very, very close attention to their past. And I think that all companies can learn a lot from that because so many companies have built built greatness on a wonderful foundation, and then they get to this frilly, nonsense bullshit. And then they kind of lose interest in them. So I love Ressence for understanding where their company started and how to tap into that. So in a new way. So anyway, what is it? It's a new watch by Ressence, just released a couple of weeks ago. It is mechanically just like other Ressence watches. It operates as simply as I can put it without a crown, based on an ETA movement. I forget the reference. You could put it right here. But with proprietary Ressence technology that allows for the wheels in the mechanism to power not hands but discs, which is super interesting. So the watch has a presentation like no other. You have power reserve in one circle. You have hours in another. A floating minute hand around the outer track. This watch to me is just an incredible amount of fun, and you totally lose sight of the fact that it's an ETA movement that would normally bother people. But the point here with the mechanism and how important it is, no one's doing this like Ressence. Actually, no one's doing it, at least as I can tell. And certainly if they were to, Ressence invented this technology. I don't think that it would benefit the consumer or Ressence for them to develop an in-house caliber. They've developed their technology. They've built this watch, with these lines of watches, based off of their own vision, right? It has nothing, of course it has something to do with ETA, but you can't just say they popped an ETA movement into a watch and made a cool design and called it a day. By no means. And the reality is, if they were to make an in-house caliber, you're blowing out, the price range. You're going from an expensive watch to an unaffordable watch completely. This watch is released at $20,000, which, although of course is a lot of money. How dare we look down at $20,000? But in a market where 25 or 27 for a Nautilus is almost looked at like almost like a staple watch, you gotta look at 20,000 like a relatively affordable. I know it sounds ridiculous, and it does to me as well, believe me. But in this market, $20,000 is somewhat of a value prop. I go so far to say. Not to mention, on the secondhand market, because these watches are independents, right? Because these watches don't have mass market appeal. If the production is high enough, if there are enough watches that are produced and then inevitably end up on the secondhand market, you'll be able to fetch some of these watches for very, very low prices. I'd say nearing $15,000, if not below, which is like incredible. Think about even the likes of Patek and Lange and everyone. You lose money, on secondhand. And then independence, it gets even worse. So I think that this watch, although right now does represent value at $20,000 because of the incredible interpretation and kind of, and modification to these movements and how they have envisioned and then communicated that vision of time, I think $20,000 is a value prop, but at $15,000, to me, it's almost a no-brainer buy. As far as size is concerned, it's 41 millimeters, which really isn't large at all. I think that it will wear larger due to the size and the flatness of the dial, but still 41 millimeters it's really not, it's not a large watch. It's a little bit big for me and my wrists, but I can say with confidence that a larger wrist man, or really even an average wrist guy, would be able to wear this watch. And another, just terrific point here to bring up is, many of the Ressence in the past, the Model 3 and Model 5, their price ranges were even higher. You're talking $35,000, $45,000. And that truthfully is, it's the next level of unaffordable. Even $20,000 is very expensive, but once you're talking $35,000 and $40,000, you're really isolating most people that are even aspiring to take a dip. And I think that introducing people to Ressence at $20,000, although it's definitely a lot of money, you're more likely to get them to say, all right, let's give it a shot. All right, I'll give these guys a shot. Let me see how I actually like their technology. And then you're making that watch geek, someone who may have opted for a more traditional Patek Philippe Nautilus or Aquanaut. See, you could say now, holy shit, I can think about watches in slightly a new way now. And I can consume a technology a little bit more critically and not just listen to, oh, it's an ETA, because I know what it feels like and I experience the mechanics every day. I am consuming their vision. And I think that that's a great opportunity. So for pricing this watch at a more affordable price bracket gives them the opportunity to convert more people into understanding their perspective, understanding how they view the future of their watches and technology. And then every person that gets it, they post about it, they talk about it, and et cetera, the rest is history. So now let's talk about for a second how it is that Ressence is tapping into their history. Their Type 1 was their first model. Now, although the Type 1 was manipulated by Crown, the display of the entire watch was the first time that a watch was displayed in this fashion, right? You can argue that, the old Digital Ultra Futurmatics had a similar kind of way, but truthfully, it's by no means the same. Even more so, a throwback to the Type 1, Ressence released their Type 3 years later. Now, this watch was really the watch that put Ressence on the major map because they made this dome crystal, and the watch was not powered by, but displayed in oil. So really the entire watch from case all the way around and back, you could tell the time. It wasn't just a flat crystal that you couldn't read. It really was incredible. It almost looked as if the crystal and the watch were one and the same, because it was. The oil was pushing all the way up and it was, showing through that. But their Type 1 did not have that technology. So although they became famous here, their roots are in these, metallic dials, which they're tapping back into now. Now, Ressence did this before when they reintroduced their Type 1 without a crown and introduced their technology in which you manipulated the time and control the time by the case back. So, these watches are so incredibly intelligent. In an episode of Talking Watches, a guest referred to Ressence as if Apple were to make a mechanical watch, and I think that's true. There's just so much here it's so impressive. Not only are they the only guy in town that's doing it, but they invented this technology that is truly, exciting. And this is coming from, someone who really reads about and, consumes watches all day long, and someone makes a better time only, or someone makes a more affordable perpetual calendar, or someone makes this, or someone does their version of something that already exists, and that's great, and I love reading that stuff, and I love speaking about it and owning it. But when someone Ressence in this instance does something so uniquely theirs, I'm excited. Because they're not copycatting, they're not building on someone else, they're really being themselves. And that is so interesting to me. So I give Ressence huge props for not only being themselves, but for tapping back into and revisiting their past and building on their past. They build on their foundation. That is just so important. I'm an enormous fan of Ressence. It was my pleasure seeing this watch and talking about it. I think not only is it cutting edge, but like I said, connected to its roots and flat out beautiful. So if you're on the market for one of these, I say take the dive. Thank you guys so much for watching Ask T&H episode 124, and check out the watches in the watch shop at theoandharris.com.